They said this seat at the HOA board table wasn't mine, even though I paid nearly every special assessment in Pinewood Estates. I stayed silent when the vice president turned away, when the new treasurer was her son. But then a spreadsheet leaked and I had a red pen. Don't look away from this story because by the end, she was the one with no seat at the table anymore. My name is Rachel Lennox and I'm 32 years old. I work as a senior financial analyst at Falworth Metrics, a tech company in Oakwell that specializes in predictive analytics. You'd think someone who spends their days parsing spreadsheets and spotting financial patterns would have seen the red flags in their own community sooner. But when it's the place you call home, you develop blind spots the size of Texas. The mahogany board table in the Pinewood Estates clubhouse seats 8, but there were only ever 4 of us who really mattered. The HOA president Karen Voss, her son Derek, the vice president who used to be my neighbor ally, and me. It's a beautiful piece my late father donated after the clubhouse was built. One of the few things that survived the financial wreckage after he passed when I was 15. Every monthly board meeting, we'd gather around it for what Karen called community decisions, though the term community had become increasingly flexible in its definition. I remember the first time I noticed my place at the table had shifted. It was subtle, so subtle I almost missed it. When I first moved back after college 5 years ago and got elected to the board, I sat at the head, the spot my father's legacy had earned me. But gradually, meeting by meeting, I found myself migrating toward the far end, displaced by Derek whenever he showed up in his new role as treasurer. Derek needs to sit closer to discuss reserve fund strategy with me, Karen would say, gesturing to the chair that had been mine, and the vice president would nod, her eyes avoiding mine as she'd murmur, "Rachel, honey, would you mind shifting? For the good of the community." I minded, but I moved. Derek was 2 years older than me with the kind of swagger that came from never earning anything. While I'd worked 3 jobs through college and clawed my way up, Derek had floated on what Karen called strategic investments in his future. A business degree from a private college Karen paid for, a golf cart that materialized for his 25th birthday, suits that cost more than my monthly HOA dues. My son, the future community leader, Karen would beam during these meetings while Derek regaled us with his latest venture. Usually some half-baked scheme involving crypto or dropshipping that fizzled out within months. Each failure was met with a pat on the back and another special assessment vote from Karen. Learning experiences, she'd call them. Every great HOA leader has a few false starts. Meanwhile, I'd sit at my relegated end of the table, pushing my notes around while mentally calculating how much of the next reserve contribution would come from my account. See, despite being the only one with a steady 6-figure income, I was never the backbone in Karen's narrative. I was the helpful resident, the one who pitched in, as if my extra voluntary contributions were pocket change rather than the glue keeping the community pool, roads, and landscaping from crumbling. The annual HOA dues were $2,400 a month for my property alone because of its size, but I paid an extra $1,800 in special assessments every quarter mortgage on the clubhouse upgrades, utilities, insurance, property taxes for common areas, all primarily funded by my salary. But at board meetings, Karen would talk about her leadership providing for the community, while I bit my tongue so hard it bled. "You're so lucky to have Karen watching out for us," the vice president would tell me while stacking minutes, her voice carrying that pleading tone I'd come to despise. "She's been so good to Pinewood Estates. Remember how run-down things were before." I remembered working overnight shifts while attending community college. I remembered my mother crying over assessment bills spread across this very table. I remembered the day Karen introduced herself as the new president from the neighborhood watch group, and how her presence seemed to breathe order back into the chaos. How could I resent the woman who'd made the community feel safe again? But that was before I understood the price of that safety. Rachel's doing well at her little job, Karen announced one meeting, carving the agenda like she was performing surgery. Aren't you, Rachel? My little job paid $118,000 a year plus bonuses. Karen's part-time real estate gig brought in maybe $6,500 monthly. But in Karen's world, her HOA presidency apparently multiplied her contribution by some factor I hadn't learned in my finance courses. She should really think about sharing more of her success with the community, Derek chimed in, not looking up from his phone. I mean, we all live here together. We should all contribute equally. The audacity nearly choked me. Derek, who paid exactly zero toward any common area expense, was lecturing me about equal contribution. I opened my mouth to respond, but the vice president's hand found mine under the table, squeezing in that way that meant please, not now, keep the peace. So I kept the peace. I always kept the peace. Actually, Karen said, setting down her gavel with theatrical precision, Derek raises a good point. Rachel, we need to talk about restructuring the reserve fund. It's not efficient having everyone pay dues separately. We should pool resources, have one account for all community expenses that we all contribute to proportionally. Proportionally, I couldn't help the incredulous laugh that escaped. How exactly would that work when we're all one community? Karen interrupted, her voice taking on that patronizing tone she reserved for moments when anyone dared challenge her authority. The board shares responsibilities. Derek will manage the account. He's been taking accounting courses online. Derek had been taking those courses for 2 years without completing a single certification. But there he sat, nodding sagely like he'd just been appointed CFO of the entire neighborhood. It makes sense, the vice president added quietly, and I could hear the rehearsal in her words. They had discussed this beforehand. Planned it. Karen thinks it would be simpler, and Derek could use the experience for his resume. I looked around the table at Karen's satisfied smirk, at Derek's entitled expectation, at the vice president's pleading eyes, and realized my place at this table had never really been about the physical seat. It was about my role in this twisted HOA dynamic, the silent financier, the taken-for-granted provider, the one who gave and was expected to be grateful for the privilege. We'll discuss it later, I said, the words ash in my mouth. Karen's smile widened. Of course, board decisions should be made together. Though, really, it's already decided, isn't it? We start next month. That night, I lay in my childhood home, the one room in the community that still felt like mine, and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in the darkness, I could hear Karen and Derek laughing over wine on the clubhouse patio, planning how they'd spend the reserve money. The vice president's television droned through the thin walls, the volume high enough to drown out any doubts she might be harboring. And I realized that this table, this beautiful mahogany table that had witnessed my father's laughter and my mother's tears and my own gradual erasure, had become a symbol of everything wrong with Pinewood Estates. I was 32 years old, successful by any objective measure. And yet here I was, relegated to the corner of my own community's board table, expected to fund a neighborhood I had no real say in. But Karen was wrong about one thing. Nothing had been decided yet. Not by a long shot. The reserve fund restructuring went into effect the first week of March. Karen presented it like she was unveiling a revolutionary neighborhood strategy, complete with a printed PowerPoint she'd clearly made Derek create. There we sat at the Sunday board table, me in my usual exile position, while Karen walked us through the new structure. Each adult board member and high-contributing resident will contribute 40% of their monthly income, she announced, sliding copies across the mahogany surface. This ensures everyone pays their fair share proportionally for the good of the community. I did the math instantly. 40% of my salary would be nearly $4,000 a month extra. 40% of Karen's would be about $2,200. And Derek? 40% of zero was still zero. But Karen had a solution. Derek will contribute his expertise as reserve fund manager. She continued as if expertise was valid currency. His time and skills are valuable contributions. So I pay $4,000. You pay $2,200. And Derek pays nothing? I kept my voice level, professional, the same tone I used when questioning suspicious line items at Falworth. Karen's jaw tightened. Derek is building his community leadership career. Would you deny your fellow board member the chance to gain real-world experience? Fellow board member? I corrected. And he's 34. We're all one community. The vice president interjected, her fingers nervously folding the agenda into smaller squares. Rachel, honey, you make such good money. This is just temporary until Derek gets on his feet. Temporary. Like the 6 months Derek had volunteered after his dropshipping failed, or the year after crypto, or the ongoing 18 months since his app idea fizzled. The fund will cover all community expenses, Karen continued, ignoring my objection. Landscaping, pool maintenance, clubhouse upgrades, full transparency. Derek will provide monthly reports. What Karen didn't mention, but what I noticed in the fine print, was a line item for administrative costs, 15% of all deposits payable to the fund manager. I was essentially being asked to pay Derek $600 a month to manage my own community money. I need time to review this, I said, gathering the papers. What's to review? Karen's voice carried that edge of irritation she got when anyone questioned her authority. We're one community. This is how communities operate. Unless, she paused dramatically, you don't see us as your community. There it was, the emotional manipulation delivered with the precision of a skilled abuser. Agree or be accused of not caring about the neighborhood. Submit or be the ungrateful resident who abandoned her fellow homeowners. Of course you're my community, I said, hating how small my voice sounded. I just want to understand. Then it's settled. Karen clapped her hands once, the sound sharp as a gavel. Derek will send you the account details tomorrow. First deposit due by the 15th. That night I called my best friend Sarah, who worked in corporate law. Is this even legal? I asked, pacing my living room like a caged animal. Legal? Sure. Ethical? Smart. She paused. Rachel, you need to get out of that board seat. But how could I leave? My home was here. My father's legacy was here. At least that's what I told myself as I set up the automatic transfer to the joint reserve account Derek had created. For $1,000 every month disappeared into an account I had no control over. The first few months, Derek actually produced reports, sloppy Excel sheets with vague categories like community necessities and infrastructure improvements. I noticed discrepancies immediately. Our landscaping bills had somehow tripled. Infrastructure improvements included charges from high-end electronic stores and luxury golf cart dealerships. We needed a new security system for family, community movie nights. Derek explained when I questioned a $3,000 charge. We'd had exactly 0 community movie nights. When I pointed out that his administrative fee wasn't supposed to cover personal expenses, he laughed. You're thinking too small, Rachel. This is about investing in our community's quality of life. Isn't that worth more than numbers on a spreadsheet? By month 4, the reports stopped coming altogether. Where's the June report? I asked at the meeting, interrupting Karen's monologue about her latest golf cart upgrade. Derek's been busy, Karen said, tapping her pen on the table, a $60 custom engraved pen I'd apparently helped fund. He's working on a new community venture. Priorities. Rachel. Financial transparency was part of our agreement. Agreement. Karen set down her pen with deliberate control. This isn't a business contract. This is a community. Or have you forgotten that while you're busy playing career woman, the word ignited something in me? I'm not playing anything. I'm working 60 hours a week to fund this. To contribute your share, Karen corrected. Just like I do. Just like Derek does in his way. The problem, Rachel, is you think your money makes you special. But in this neighborhood, we're all equal. Equal. I wanted to laugh or scream or flip this beautiful mahogany table and watch their entitled faces splatter with coffee and agenda papers. Instead, I excused myself, claiming a work emergency. In my home, I opened my banking app and stared at the numbers. In 5 months, I'd contributed $20,000 to the reserve fund. My personal savings had dwindled to almost nothing. Meanwhile, I could hear Derek through the clubhouse wall on the phone with someone about leasing a new golf cart. Yeah, the community fund is doing great, he was saying. Cash flow is strong. My cash flow. The breaking point came in August. I'd been suffering from chronic migraines, probably stress-related, my doctor said, and reached my insurance deductible. The medication alone cost $400 a month, and I needed to reduce my contribution to cover it. Absolutely not, Karen said when I brought it up at the meeting. We all have expenses. The contribution rate is non-negotiable. It's medication for a medical condition. Then use the reserve fund to pay for it, Derek suggested, not looking up from his phone. Submit a request and I'll review it. Submit a request to use my own money for my own medication. That's a great idea, Karen agreed. All personal expenses should go through proper channels. Derek, make sure Rachel fills out the appropriate forms. The vice president said nothing. She never said anything anymore, just pushed her notes around and avoided eye contact. That night I lay in bed with a migraine so severe I could barely see. And I made a decision. They wanted to play games with community money? Fine. I'd been analyzing financial data for a decade. I knew how to follow paper trails, how to document discrepancies, how to build a case that would stand up to scrutiny. Karen thought she was the queen of this neighborhood, with Derek as her heir apparent and me as the servant who happened to live on the same street. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd given the servant access to the books, and I was very, very good with numbers. The proper channels Derek had mentioned turned out to be a Google form he'd thrown together in 5 minutes. I had to list the expense, provide documentation, and write a justification for why I needed to access money for my prescription medication. The humiliation burned worse than the migraine. Under review, Derek's response came 3 days later. 3 days I'd gone without medication because I couldn't afford both the pills and my reserve contribution. When approval finally came, it was for half the amount. Budget constraints, the email said. Consider generic alternatives. I started keeping meticulous records after that. Every receipt, every bank statement, every expense I paid out of pocket because the reserve fund somehow never had funds available when I needed them. My old Honda needed new brakes. Submit a request. My work laptop died. That sounds like a personal expense. Meanwhile, Derek's new golf cart appeared in the clubhouse driveway one September morning, gleaming like a middle finger extended directly at me. Leased through the community business, he explained at the next meeting, keys conspicuously placed next to his seat. Tax write-off. Smart financial planning. He winked at Karen, who nodded approvingly. What community business? I asked, though I already suspected. Voss Community Enterprises, Karen announced proudly. Derek's been building it for months. Consulting, financial management, that sort of thing. The cart is a necessary business expense. Image matters in that world. My throat felt tight. And the funding for this business came from initial capital from the reserve fund. Obviously, Derek said like I was stupid for asking. That's what it's for, investing in our future with my money. I became a ghost in my own neighborhood after that. Wake at 5 a.m., shower quietly while everyone else slept, grab a granola bar, groceries had become too contentious to navigate. Drive to work in my increasingly decrepit Honda. listening to the brakes squeal and calculating how many more miles I could squeeze out. At Fallworth Metrics, I was respected, valued. My analyses had saved the company millions. But every evening I'd drive home to a community where I was treated like an ATM with delusions of grandeur. I stopped attending most board meetings, claiming work obligations. It was partly true. I'd started taking extra projects, anything to avoid that mahogany table where my worth was measured only in dollars transferred. But I could hear them through the clubhouse windows, planning community events and upgrades that always seemed to require just a little more from the reserve coffers. Rachel's becoming antisocial. I heard the vice president tell Karen one night, "I'm worried about her. She's always been selfish." Karen replied, "Thinks she's better than us because of her fancy job. But she'll learn. They always do." The text from the vice president came on a Thursday afternoon while I was in a meeting. Emergency. Need to talk about clubhouse equity. My stomach dropped. I excused myself and called immediately. "Karen thinks we should refinance the clubhouse loan," she said, her voice shaky. "Take out some equity for improvements. The property has appreciated so much since your father's donation." "No." I gripped my phone tighter. "The clubhouse is almost paid off with Dad's legacy funds. Karen says it's wasteful to have all that equity just sitting there. Derek found a broker who can get us a great rate. We could take out maybe $200,000, fix up the place, maybe help Derek expand his consulting business. The clubhouse, the one thing Dad had left the community. The one stable element after his death. They wanted to gamble it on Derek's fantasies." "I won't sign anything," I said firmly. "My name is still on the original donor documents. Remember." Silence. "Then Karen says we can remove you from the records since you're not really contributing to the community anymore. Missing meetings, being distant. She says it's like you're not even part of the neighborhood. The cruelty of it, using my absence to justify stealing my father's legacy, took my breath away. But worse was the vice president's tone. Rehearsed. Coached. "Vice president," I said carefully, "I contribute $4,000 a month. I pay more than—" "Money isn't everything, Rachel. Karen provides leadership. Derek provides, well, he's building something. What do you provide besides a check?" What did I provide? Just the roof over the common areas, the landscaping, the utilities that kept the neighborhood running, the insurance that protected everyone. But in Karen's narrative, none of that mattered. I was just the bitter single resident who thought her money meant something. I ended the call and sat in my car for an hour, staring at nothing. They wanted me to feel worthless, to doubt my own contributions, to be grateful for whatever scraps of belonging they threw my way. It was working. That night I didn't go home. I got a hotel room, a small rebellion that felt enormous. I ordered room service, took a hot bath, and slept in a bed where no one could judge me for existing. The next morning I called in sick for the first time in 3 years. I spent that day doing something I should have done months ago, consulting with a lawyer, not Sarah, but someone she recommended, a specialist in Homeowners Association fraud cases. "Document everything," he told me after reviewing my records. "Every transfer, every denied expense, every business registration in their names. Build your case carefully. And Rachel," he looked at me seriously, "consider resigning from the board. These situations can escalate when challenged." But I wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. That clubhouse held my father's memory, my childhood, the last threads connecting me to who I'd been before Karen inserted herself. If I left, felt like surrendering. So I went back, slipped into the next meeting after they'd gone home, moving through the clubhouse like I was the intruder. On the counter I noticed paperwork, refinancing documents with sticky notes marking where the vice president should sign. My name had already been crossed out in several places, replaced with Karen Voss in Derek's sloppy handwriting. I took photos of every page. The next morning Karen was waiting for me in the clubhouse kitchen, coffee mug in hand like a weapon. "Missed you at the last meeting again," she said, blocking my path. "The vice president is concerned." "We all are." "I'm fine." I tried to step around her. "Are you?" She didn't move. "Because from where I'm standing, you seem to be pulling away from this community, becoming selfish, isolated. It's not healthy, Rachel. What's not healthy is paying thousands a month to be treated like a second-class resident in my own neighborhood." Her face reddened. "Your neighborhood? This stopped being your neighborhood the day I became president. This is my community now. My board. You're here because I allow it. Because despite your attitude, I believe in keeping neighborhoods together, but that generosity has limits." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm educating you." She stepped closer, coffee breath washing over me. "You think your money makes you important? I've handled a dozen just like you. Career women who think a paycheck equals power. But at the end of the day, you're just a lonely resident pushing 40, clinging to your father's donation because you've got nowhere else to go." I was 32. But in Karen's mind, any single woman over 30 might as well be dead. "I have to go to work," I said, "where I'm valued, where my contributions matter." "Run along then," she sneered. "Make your little spreadsheets. Play your little games. But remember, everything you are, everything you have exists because I tolerate it." The moment that changes, she snapped her fingers. Gone. I left the clubhouse shaking, her words echoing in my ears. But underneath the hurt and humiliation, something else was building. Rage, pure, crystalline rage. They thought I was weak because I'd been kind. They thought I was worthless because I'd been generous. They thought I was beaten because I'd been quiet. They had no idea who they were dealing with. A woman who'd survived her father's death, worked her way through school, and built a career from nothing wasn't broken by bullies with delusions of HOA grandeur. She was forged by them, and I was done being polite about it. The discovery happened by accident, like most catastrophic revelations do. I'd come home early with another migraine and heard Derek's golf cart in the driveway. Strange, since he'd told Karen he had client meetings all day. I slipped in through the back door, planning to avoid confrontation by heading straight to the records room. But Derek's voice carried from the office, what used to be my father's donor study, loud and careless. "No, the August transfers are clean. I broke them into smaller amounts like you suggested. Under 10K each, no flags. Yeah, the consulting fees are perfect." She never even questions those. My hand froze on the banister, heart hammering. I crept closer. "The beauty is she can't audit what she can't access," Derek laughed. "Mom made sure I'm the only administrator." "Nah, Rachel's too beaten down to check. You should see her like a whipped resident. Grateful we even let her sit at the table." Blood roared in my ears, but I forced myself to remain silent, to listen, to learn. "Next month we'll bump it up. Maybe 15%, call it seasonal adjustments or something. The clubhouse IRA thing, I'm still working on it. The vice president's being weirdly protective about that one. But Mom will convince her. She always does. The IRA, my father's donor retirement account for the community, funded by his legacy benefits. The last piece of financial security independent of Karen. I waited until I heard Derek leave for his client meeting, probably happy hour at the country club, then slipped into the office. His laptop sat open on the desk, unlocked, careless or maybe just arrogant, assuming I'd never dare enter his domain. The desktop was a mess, but one folder caught my eye, plan_fund_bonuses. My hands trembled as I clicked open. Spreadsheet after spreadsheet filled my screen, each more damning than the last. The reserve fund I'd been funding, it was a maze of transfers, redirections, and outright theft. Consulting fee Derek Voss $3,200. Business development Voss Enterprises $4,500. Investment transfer KV Holdings $800. Administrative bonus August $2,800. KV Holdings Karen Voss Holdings. They'd created shell companies to funnel money through, but it went deeper. There were credit cards I didn't know existed, opened using the community reserve as collateral. Luxury purchases hidden in Byzantine expense reports. A separate savings account labeled expansion fund that held. I had to calculate twice to believe it. $87, $314.87. $87,000 siphoned from my contributions over 18 months, hidden behind fake business expenses and administrative fees. I pulled out my phone and started taking photos. Every screen, every spreadsheet, every evidence of their elaborate con. But I needed more. I needed the bank statements, the credit card records, the paper trail that would prove this wasn't just poor management but deliberate fraud. The filing cabinet was locked, but Derek had helpfully labeled his keychain. Office, cart, gym, so organized for someone so sloppy with digital security. Inside I found everything. Bank statements showing transfers to personal accounts, credit card bills listing charges for vacations, electronics, even what looked like gambling debts from a casino in Atlantic City. And there, in a folder marked Clubhouse Plans, were documents that made my blood run cold. Refinancing paperwork, yes, but also quiet claim deeds, powers of attorney, documents that would not just remove me from the donor records but give Karen complete control over community assets. Some were already signed. Others had forged signatures that looked nothing like mine or the vice president's actual handwriting. They weren't just stealing from me. They were positioning to take everything. I heard a cart in the driveway and quickly photographed the last pages before returning everything to its place. My hands were steady now, the migraine forgotten. Adrenaline and fury made excellent painkillers. Rachel? The vice president's voice drifted up from downstairs. Are you home? Karen wants to have a board meeting tonight. Board meeting? I almost laughed. I emerged from my room, calm as a lake before a storm. Of course. What time? She looked surprised by my easy agreement. 7. After the agenda review. I'll be there. I spent the next 2 hours uploading every photo to 3 different cloud services, emailing copies to my lawyer, and creating a detailed timeline of every suspicious transaction. The forensic accountant in me was singing. This wasn't just evidence. It was a masterpiece of documentation. At 7 sharp, I took my place at the mahogany table, my usual exile seat. Of course. Karen sat at the head, Derek to her right, the vice president to her left, the queen and her heir, with the board reduced to a silent ornament. Rachel, Karen began, her tone suggesting a prepared speech. We need to discuss your recent behavior, the isolation, the hostility, the refusal to participate in community activities. It's affecting everyone, especially the vice president. The vice president nodded on cue, though her eyes remained fixed on her clasped hands. We think, Karen continued, that it might be best if you resigned from the board. Somewhere you can be independent, live the single career woman life you clearly prefer. I see. I kept my voice neutral. And my financial contributions? Derek smirked. Well, if you're not on the board, you wouldn't need to contribute extra to the reserve. Seems fair. Very fair, I agreed. And the $87,314? The silence was delicious. Karen recovered first, her politician's smile barely wavering. I'm not sure what you're referring to. The money transferred from the reserve fund to various shell companies, KV Holdings particularly, or should I itemize the consulting fees, the business development costs, the administrative bonuses that went directly into personal accounts? Derek's face had gone pale. You went through your carelessly unlocked laptop. Yes. Your poorly secured filing cabinet. That too. Forensic accounting is literally my job. Derek, did you really think I wouldn't notice? How dare you? Karen slammed her hand on the table, making the vice president jump. Breaking into private property. Violating our trust. Violating trust? I laughed. Actually laughed. You've been stealing from the community for 18 months and you want to talk about trust? It's not stealing when it's community money being used for community purposes, Karen snarled. That money was invested in building our future. Your future. Your son's future. Built on my labor while you convinced me I was worthless. That I should be grateful for the privilege of funding your lifestyle. You ungrateful little. I have copies of everything, I interrupted calmly. Bank records, credit card statements, the falsified business expenses, the forged signatures on the refinancing documents. Oh yes, I found those too. Turns out fraud is still illegal, even when it's for the community. The vice president finally looked up, confused. Forged signatures. Karen, what is she talking about? Nothing. Honey, Rachel's having some kind of breakdown. The quiet claim deed with your signature dated last Tuesday, I told her. When you were visiting your sister in Phoenix. Impressive trick. Signing documents from 2,000 miles away. The color drained from the vice president's face as she turned to Karen. You said those were just preliminary papers. I continued, riding the momentum. I have a lawyer. A good one. Specializes in Homeowners Association fraud and elder financial abuse. Yes, Vice President, forging your signature on community documents counts as fraud. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. You can't prove anything, Derek blustered, but his voice shook. Those transfers were all legitimate business. Legitimate businesses have documentation, contracts, actual clients. Not just your drinking buddies who'll swear you gave them consulting over beers at the club. I pulled out a printed sheet, one of many I'd prepared that afternoon. Here's my offer. Every penny returned within 30 days. The clubhouse refinancing stopped immediately. All forged documents destroyed. Do that and I resign quietly. Or, Karen's voice was dangerous now. All pretense of presidential authority gone. Or I file charges, criminal charges, fraud, embezzlement, forgery, financial abuse of community assets. I have enough evidence to bury you both. Derek might even lose his imaginary accounting credentials along with his real freedom. You wouldn't, the vice president whispered. The scandal, the neighborhood? What neighborhood? I asked her gently. The one where I pay for everything but get treated like a servant. The one where my father's legacy is being stolen while I'm told to be grateful. That neighborhood. She started crying then, silent tears that felt like accusations. But I was done feeling guilty for their choices. 30 days, I repeated, standing up. Oh, and Derek, you're right. I am resigning from the board. But the extra contributions stop immediately. Use some of that $87,000 you stole to pay the bills. You can't just, Karen started. Watch me. I walked to the door, then paused. One more thing. That beautiful mahogany table, the one that belonged to my father's donation. I'll be taking that too. It's mine by original donor papers. And unlike you, I have the paperwork to prove it. The last thing I heard before closing the door was the sound of Karen's fist hitting that precious mahogany and Derek's panicked voice saying, Mom, what do we do? What if she's serious? Oh, I was serious. Deadly serious. Victoria Hartley's office occupied the 20th floor of a glass tower in downtown Oakwell. All clean lines and professional confidence. I had first met her 2 years ago when Falworth Metrics brought her in for a complex tax restructuring. She'd impressed me then with her ability to see through corporate smokescreens. Now I needed that clarity for my own situation. Rachel, she greeted me, her silver hair gleaming under the office lights. When you called, you sounded different, urgent. I sat across from her mahogany desk, another beautiful piece that didn't make my stomach churn, and opened my laptop. I need to show you something. Several somethings, actually. For the next hour I walked her through everything. The forced reserve restructuring, the shell companies, the systematic theft disguised as community expenses. Her expression grew increasingly grim as I showed her the forged documents, the fraudulent transfers, the credit cards I'd never known existed. "This is extensive," she said finally, removing her reading glasses to pinch the bridge of her nose. "And meticulous. Your documentation is excellent. I'm a financial analyst. Documentation is what I do." Indeed, she pulled up something on her computer. "The forgery alone is a felony. Add in the embezzlement, the financial abuse implications with the Vice President Rachel. They're looking at serious jail time if you pursue this criminally. What are my options?" She leaned back, fingers steepled. "Criminal prosecution is one path. Civil litigation is another. You could sue for damages, likely recover far more than what was taken. Or," she paused, "there's a third option, asset freezing. Tell me more." "With this evidence, I can petition the court for an emergency order to freeze all accounts associated with these transactions. The reserve fund, the shell companies, even their personal accounts if we can show commingling of funds, which from what I'm seeing, we absolutely can. They wouldn't be able to access anything until the matter is resolved." I thought of Karen's smug face, Derek's casual arrogance. How quickly? With the right judge. 72 hours. Maybe less if I emphasize the ongoing fraud risk. She studied me. "But Rachel, once we do this, there's no going back. They'll know you're serious. Things could get ugly. Things are already ugly. They just hide it behind, for the good of the community meetings and fake concern." "Fair point." She pulled out a legal pad, began making notes. "There's something else you should know. The refinancing documents, if they submitted these forged signatures to a lender, that's federal fraud. Mail fraud if they used the postal service. Wire fraud if submitted electronically. The FBI could get involved." FBI? The word hung in the air between us, heavy with implications. I started, then stopped. What didn't I want? To hurt the vice president. She'd already chosen her side. To destroy Karen and Derek. They'd shown no such concern for me. I don't want this to drag out for years. Understood.
Here's what he propose.
We file for the asset freeze immediately. That gets their attention. Then we offer a settlement. Full restitution plus damages in exchange for not pursuing criminal charges. Most people fold when facing federal prosecution. And if they don't fold, her smile was sharp as winter, then we bury them. Legally speaking, of course. I signed the papers she prepared, authorizing her to act on my behalf. As I left her office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Control. The next 2 days passed in a blur. I'd taken vacation time from work, claiming a family emergency, not entirely a lie. I found a furnished apartment in the city, a modern space with clean walls and no memories. Movers were scheduled to collect my belongings while Karen and Derek were at the clubhouse. But first I had one more meeting. The vice president had agreed to meet me at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory. She looked older than her 58 years. Stress etched in lines around her eyes. Part of me ached for the neighbor I'd lost. Not to death but to Karen's influence. But sympathy was a luxury I couldn't afford. "Hi." She fidgeted with her coffee cup, not meeting my eyes. "Rachel. Honey, I've been thinking maybe we were too harsh. If you apologize to Karen, explain about the stress from work, Vice President." I placed a folder on the table between us. "I need you to look at something." Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside were copies of the forged documents, highlighting every falsified signature, every fraudulent transfer that had required her supposed consent. I watched her face crumble as understanding dawned. She forged my signature multiple times on refinancing documents that would have put the clubhouse at risk, on powers of attorney that would have given her complete control of community finances. Vice President, your donor IRA, the one my father left, they were planning to liquidate it. No, the word came out as a whisper. Karen loves the community. She wouldn't. The evidence is right there. She was crying now, silent tears that splashed onto the documents. I gave her everything, welcomed her son, turned my back on you when you complained. Oh God, Rachel, what have I done? I wanted to comfort her, but I needed her to understand. You chose her over my father's legacy, over our neighborhood. I was lonely after your husband died, she sobbed. I couldn't handle the finances, the decisions. It all terrified me. Then Karen appeared, so confident, so willing to take charge. I didn't want to see what she was taking in return. My inheritance, my earnings, my self-worth. Yes, she looked up at me then, mascara streaking her cheeks. What's going to happen? Miss Hartley is filing papers today. All the accounts will be frozen. The reserve fund, Karen's accounts, Derek's, every penny they stole will be tracked and recovered. After that, I shrugged. That depends on them. They can return the money and walk away, or they can fight and face criminal charges. Criminal charges? Her voice rose. Rachel, no. Please think of what people will say. I'm done caring what people say. I'm done being silent to keep the peace. Vice President, they stole nearly $90,000 from the community. They forged your signature. They were going to take your donor accounts, everything my father worked for. And you want me to worry about gossip? She slumped in her chair, suddenly looking fragile. Where will I go if Karen leaves? The clubhouse is safe. It's in the original donor trust. Predates her presidency. Your donor accounts are protected. I'll help you budget. Get financial counseling. You'll learn to handle the community books yourself this time. After everything, you'd still help me? I considered the question, looking at this woman who'd been my neighbor, who'd sung me lullabies and taught me to be strong, who'd then stood silent while her president systematically destroyed me. The anger was still there, might always be there, but beneath it, you're still part of this community, I said finally. That doesn't excuse what you did or didn't do, but it means I won't abandon you the way you abandoned my father's legacy. I'll help you get free of them. After that, we'll see. I want to go to therapy, she said suddenly. Individual, not bored. Figure out why I was so willing to sacrifice the neighborhood for a false sense of control. That's a good start. We talked until the coffee shop closed, cataloging the damage, making lists of accounts to check, lawyers to call, steps to take. As the sun set, I stood to leave. Rachel, she called as I reached the door. That mahogany table, when you take it, and you should take it. Could I maybe visit sometimes? Sit at it with you. Earn my place there. Honestly, I turned back, saw her standing small and uncertain in the community she'd almost lost. Maybe someday. But Vice President, when you sit at my table, you'll sit as my equal. Never again as someone who puts others above the community in my own neighborhood. I understand. And Rachel, thank you for answering the phone, for coming, for not letting them take everything. I didn't do it for you, I said honestly. I did it for me because I deserved better. But maybe we both did. I left her there to start cleaning up the wreckage of her choices. As I drove back to my apartment, I thought about tables, about who sits where, who gets served, who pays the bill, about the difference between being given a seat and taking one. Karen and Derek thought they owned the table. The vice president thought being aligned with Karen gave her status at it. But me, I'd learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the only way to win is to flip the table entirely and build your own. And at my table, Everyone pays their fair share or they don't sit at all. Monday arrived with the kind of crisp autumn morning that promised change. I sat in Miss Hartley's office as she prepared the final criminal complaint. My phone silent despite the barrage of calls I knew were coming. "They're desperate," she said, sliding a printout across her desk. 11 missed calls from Derek, 4 from Karen, and these delightful text messages. I scanned them. "This is killing the community. You're destroying our neighborhood. Blood money won't make you happy. Answer your phone, you selfish resident." Charming. The last one might count as harassment. "Already documented. We'll add it to the file." Miss Hartley's assistant knocked, entered with more papers. "Speaking of which, the FBI wants to meet with you Thursday. Agent Martinez has expanded the investigation. Turns out your HOA president and her son had similar arrangements with 2 other neighborhoods before you." My stomach turned. Other neighborhoods. Karen's ex-community in Nevada. A widow she dated briefly in Florida. Same pattern, gained financial control. Systematic theft disguised as community expenses. "You're the first one who fought back." The revelation shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. I thought I was special in my misery. Instead, I was just the latest mark who'd finally grown teeth. "This changes things," Miss Hartley continued. "With a pattern of behavior, we're looking at potential RICO charges, organized crime statutes. Much more serious." My phone buzzed again. This time the vice president. "Please reconsider. Karen says she'll pay back half if you drop charges. Half after everything." They were trying to negotiate like this was a yard sale. "No deals," I told Miss Hartley. "File everything." She smiled, sharp and satisfied. "With pleasure." I left her office and drove to work where my life had remained remarkably stable despite the chaos in the neighborhood. My manager had noticed my improved focus lately. "Whatever you're doing differently, keep it up," she'd said. If only she knew that HOA revenge was apparently excellent for productivity. Tuesday brought the inevitable. I was reviewing quarterly projections when security called. "Miss Lennox, there's a Derek Voss here demanding to see you. He's agitated. Don't let him up." "I'll come down." I found Derek in the lobby, disheveled and wild-eyed. His usual swagger had devolved into something desperate and mean. "You," he snarled when he saw me. "Do you know what you've done?" "They froze everything. I can't even buy gas." "Then walk," I suggested calmly. Security moved closer, sensing tension. The FBI came to the clubhouse. The vice president's having a breakdown. Karen's talking about fleeing the country. "This is what you wanted, to destroy your own community. You destroyed yourselves. I just stopped funding it." His face contorted. "That money was ours. We earned it by dealing with you, putting up with your..." "My what?" "My existence. My audacity in thinking I deserved respect in my own neighborhood. You were never supposed to fight back." The words exploded from him, raw and honest. "You were supposed to be grateful. We gave you a community. You gave me a con game where I paid to be insulted." I stepped back. "Done with this confrontation. Security will escort you out. Don't come to my workplace again. This isn't over." "Actually, it is. Your lawyer should have explained that harassment violates your bail conditions." "Would you like to spend tonight in jail?" The fight drained from him then, reality finally penetrating his entitled delusion. Security led him away, but not before he turned back one last time. "The vice president's right about you," he called. "You're just like your father. Cold, calculating, all about the money." "My father," I said quietly, "would have seen through you in 5 minutes. I took 2 years. That's my only regret." Wednesday brought silence, the eerie kind that precedes storms. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. Just me, my work, and my new apartment with its clean surfaces and locks Karen didn't have keys to. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Morrison. She specialized in financial abuse survivors. You're grieving, she told me during our second session. Not just the money, but the community you thought you had. I'm angry, I corrected. Anger is part of grief. You lost your neighbor's loyalty, your sense of home, your belief that community meant protection. That's worth mourning. She was right. Of course, beneath the righteous fury lay a deep well of sadness for the neighborhood that might have been. Thursday arrived with Agent Martinez, a sharp woman who reminded me of Miss Hartley but with federal authority behind her smile. Your documentation is impeccable, she said, reviewing my files. Financial crimes are usually messy, but this you've gift-wrapped a conviction for us. We spent hours going through everything, building a timeline that stretched back further than I'd realized. The pattern emerged clearly. Karen would target stable neighborhoods, move quickly to board control, establish financial dominance, then systematically drain resources while keeping residents emotionally dependent. Classic romance scam evolution for HOAs, Agent Martinez explained. But most victims don't have your financial expertise or emotional strength to fight back. I almost didn't, I admitted. They nearly convinced me I was worthless. But you didn't believe them. That's what matters. As I left the federal building, my phone rang. The vice president. They're gone. Both of them. Karen withdrew what little cash she could access and disappeared. Left divorce papers on the clubhouse counter. Derek, I don't know where Derek went. His office is empty. Are you safe? Yes. I changed the locks like you said. The lawyer you recommended is coming tomorrow. A pause. Rachel, I found something in Karen's office. More files. Don't touch anything. I'll call Agent Martinez. It's about her ex-community president, the one she said died in a car accident. She's alive, living in Canada, and there are emails. My blood chilled. Vice President, get out of the clubhouse now. Go to Sarah's. Why? Just go. I'll explain later. I immediately called Agent Martinez, who dispatched agents to the clubhouse. The emails the vice president had found revealed threats, stalking, a pattern of escalation when residents tried to leave Karen. Her ex-president hadn't died. She'd fled the country to escape her. By evening, a manhunt was underway. Karen and Derek Voss were now federal fugitives. Their faces soon to grace wanted posters. Everything they'd built on the foundation of my money had crumbled in less than 2 weeks. I met the vice president at Sarah's house, where she sat wrapped in a blanket, looking smaller than ever. I could have been her, she whispered. If I'd ever tried to leave, stood up to her, I could have been her ex-president, running for my life. But you're not, I said firmly. You're here. You're safe. It's over. Is it? They're still out there, running, hiding, checking over their shoulders every day for the rest of their lives. Trust me, Vice President. They've already lost everything that mattered to them. Money, status, control. Now they're just two con artists without a mark. And that's a fate worse than prison for people like them. She nodded slowly, processing this new reality where her president was a dangerous criminal and her neighbor was the hero who'd exposed her. The table, she said suddenly. The mahogany table. Still at the clubhouse. You should take it this weekend before anything else happens. We'll get it tomorrow, I promised. Together. That night, alone in my apartment, I opened a bottle of wine. Good wine. Not the cheap stuff I'd subsisted on while funding Karen's champagne tastes. I raised a glass to my reflection in the window. To the woman who found her voice and her worth in spreadsheets and subpoenas. You were wrong, Derek. This isn't over. This is just beginning. Because while they ran and hid and schemed their next con, I'd be building my career, my life, my future, all on a foundation they couldn't touch, at a table they'd never sit at again. The money had been recovered, the criminals exposed, Justice served. But the real victory, I'd recovered myself. And that was priceless. The moving truck arrived at my new apartment building just as the sun broke through October clouds. The vice president and I had retrieved the mahogany table from the clubhouse the week before. She'd helped me wrap it carefully, running her hands over the wood like she was saying goodbye to something more than furniture. "Your father would be glad," she'd said quietly. "That's going home with you." Now, watching the movers position it in my dining area, I felt something settle in my chest. The table looked different here. Not smaller, but more itself. No longer bearing the weight of false community meetings and financial manipulations. It was just beautiful wood and memory. I'd invited Sarah over to help me organize, but really I wanted a witness to this new chapter. She arrived with champagne and sass. "Holy Rachel," she said, touring the space. "This place is incredible." It was a 12th floor corner unit, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the kind of apartment I could have afforded years ago if I hadn't been hemorrhaging money into Karen and Derek's schemes. "The settlement came through yesterday," I told her, popping the champagne. "Insurance covered most of the theft, and the forensic accounting revealed even more hidden assets. Miss Hartley managed to freeze a cryptocurrency wallet Derek thought was untouchable." "How much did you recover?" "About 60% so far. The rest?" I shrugged. "Cost of education, I suppose. Expensive lesson in trust." "Any word on the terrible twosome?" "Still running. Last credible sighting was in Mexico, but Agent Martinez thinks they'll try for Southeast Asia eventually. Harder to extradite from there." We spent the afternoon arranging furniture, hanging art, transforming empty rooms into a home. I'd bought everything new. No hand-me-downs, no making do, no settling for less because someone else's wants came first. "You know what this needs," Sarah said, surveying the finished dining room. "A dinner party. Rechristen that table with better memories." She was right. The table deserved laughter that wasn't forced. Conversations that weren't minefields. Gatherings where everyone contributed equally, if not financially, then with genuine presence and respect. That evening, alone again, I sat at my father's table with a glass of wine and my laptop. The emails had been piling up, interview requests from financial magazines, speaking invitations from women's groups, even a book deal inquiry. My story, it seemed, had struck a nerve. I opened a new document and began typing, "How to Spot HOA Financial Abuse, a Survivor's Guide." The words flowed easily now, no longer choked by shame or silenced by false loyalty. I wrote about the slow erosion of boundaries, the way financial control masquerades as community care, the insidious progress from "we're all one neighborhood" to "you owe us everything." My phone buzzed. The vice president. I got a job, part-time at the library. It's not much, but vice president. That's wonderful. And I meant it. She was 62, starting over, learning to stand on her own feet for the first time since my father's donation. I also sold my jewelry. All the pieces Karen bought felt like blood diamonds once I knew where the money came from. She paused. "I'm donating it to a women's shelter for residents escaping HOA financial abuse. Is that appropriate?" "It's perfect." We talked for an hour, the longest conversation we'd had in years without Karen's shadow between us. She was seeing a therapist too, unpacking decades of financial dependence and emotional manipulation. The road back to each other would be long, perhaps impossible, but at least we were both walking it. The next morning brought unexpected news. Agent Martinez called early, her voice carefully professional. "We've arrested Derek Voss." Mexican authorities picked him up trying to board a flight to Thailand with a fake passport. And Karen still at large. But Derek is talking. Seems federal prison is less appealing than loyalty to mommy dearest. The relief hit me physically, shoulders dropping, breath coming easier. One down. "There's more," Martinez continued. Derek's cooperation is revealing a larger network. Your case might have exposed a multi-state HOA fraud ring. You've done more good than you know. After we hung up, I stood at my windows watching the city wake up. Somewhere out there, residents were sitting at kitchen tables, calculating whether they could afford to fight their HOAs, wondering if their contributions mattered, believing the lies that they were worthless without their presidents. I thought about the book I'd started writing, the speaking engagements I'd been offered. Maybe this was why I'd survived, not just to reclaim my own life, but to light a path for others. My laptop dinged with a new email. The sender made me freeze. Karen Voss. No subject line. Just, you think you've won, but I know where you work, where you live. This isn't over until I say it is. You destroyed my community. My son is in prison because of you. I'm coming for everything you love, just like you came for mine. Sleep tight, princess. I should have been terrified. Instead, I felt calm. I forwarded the email to Agent Martinez, Miss Hartley, and the detective handling my case. Then I took a screenshot and saved it to the cloud folder labeled Evidence. Ongoing. Because that's what you do when someone threatens you. You document. You report. You protect yourself with the same meticulous care you once used to protect them. My doorman called up. Miss Lennox, there's a delivery for you. I'm not expecting anything. It's flowers. Ma'am, should I send them up? Flowers? Either a genuine gesture or can you check for a card first? Read it to me. Pause. It says, for the table that was always yours. Love, Vice President. Send them up. They were sunflowers, my father's favorite. The Vice President's wedding flowers. The blooms that had graced that mahogany table for every birthday when I was young. Before Karen. Before the theft and lies and careful destruction of my worth. I arranged them in a vase. Placed them in the center of the table. The yellow petals caught the light. Bright and defiant. And absolutely perfect. My phone rang. Sarah? Did you see the news? They're calling it Operation Table Turner. The FBI is crediting an unnamed whistleblower with exposing a massive HOA fraud scheme. Girl, you're famous. Well, anonymously famous Table Turner. I had to laugh. Seriously, I know, right? Though honestly it fits. You literally turned the tables on them. She was right. I'd taken their weapon, that beautiful piece of mahogany where they'd held court and counted my money, and made it mine again. Made it a symbol of survival instead of subjugation. That night, I hosted my first dinner party. Just Sarah and a few friends from work. Nothing fancy. We ate good food, drank better wine, laughed until our sides hurt. No one sat at the head of the table because we were all equals here. No one paid more than their share because fairness was non-negotiable at my table. A toast. Sarah proposed as the evening wound down. To Rachel, who proved that the best revenge isn't living well. It's living free. We clinked glasses, and I felt my father's presence in the room. Not sad or disappointed, but proud. His daughter had protected his legacy, honored his memory, refused to let criminals steal what he'd built. To living free, I echoed. And for the first time in years, I truly was. Free from guilt, free from manipulation, free from the belief that my worth was measured in what I could provide to others while accepting scraps in return. Karen was still out there nursing her rage and plotting her revenge. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had the law on my side, friends at my back, and a table where everyone who sat was valued equally. Let her come. I turned the tables once. I could do it again. The call from Miss Hartley came on a Thursday evening, 6 weeks after Karen's threatening email. I was reviewing quarterly reports at my mahogany table, a habit I'd developed, reclaiming the space with productive work instead of toxic meetings. Rachel, I have news. Can you come to my office first thing tomorrow? Her tone was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. I agreed and spent the night wondering if Karen had been caught or if some new complication had emerged. Sleep came fitfully, but I refused to let fear rule me. That was the old Rachel, the one who'd paid thousands for the privilege of anxiety. Miss Hartley's office at 8 a.m. was busy with an energy I hadn't seen before. Agent Martinez was there along with 2 other FBI agents and someone from the DA's office. Karen Voss was arrested last night, Agent Martinez announced without preamble, trying to cross back into the U.S. from Mexico. Apparently life on the run wasn't as glamorous as she'd imagined. The relief hit me like a physical force. I sank into a chair. Months of low-grade tension finally releasing. "There's more," Miss Hartley added, sliding a folder across her desk. "With both Karen and Derek in custody, we've been able to freeze additional accounts. The total recovery now stands at," I read the number twice, $142,000. Not everything, but far more than I dared hope. "Derek's testimony has been invaluable," Agent Martinez continued. "He's looking at 3 to 5 years with cooperation. Karen, refusing to cooperate, is facing 15 to 20, maybe more if the prosecutors in Nevada and Florida file charges. It's over." I breathed the words, feeling foreign in my mouth. "The criminal case?" "Yes, but Rachel," Miss Hartley smiled. "The clubhouse is pressing charges for the unpaid bill from your final board meeting. Apparently $230 in champagne and steaks adds up." I laughed, at the poetic justice of it. They'd stuck me with countless bills over the years. Now their final meal together would follow them to federal prison. 3 months later, I stood in a courtroom watching Karen Voss get sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. She'd aged a decade since arrest, her commanding presence reduced to an orange jumpsuit and shackles. When the judge read the verdict, she turned to stare at me with naked hatred. I met her gaze steadily. No flinching, no fear, just the calm acknowledgement that actions have consequences, and hers had finally come due. The vice president sat beside me, her hand occasionally brushing mine in silent support. She'd testified against Karen, detailing the forgeries and manipulations. It had cost her friends who couldn't understand how she'd betrayed her president, regardless of her crimes. But she'd done it anyway. "No victim impact statement?" the prosecutor had asked me earlier. "My life is my statement," I'd replied. And it was true. Every day I lived free of their influence was testimony to survival. Derek had already been sentenced, 4 years with possibility of parole in 2. During his allocution, he'd actually apologized. Not convincingly, but the attempt at accountability was more than I'd expected from someone who'd spent years viewing me as an ATM. As we left the courthouse, the vice president asked, "Do you think he meant it? Derek's apology? Does it matter?" I considered the question. He's facing consequences. Learning that other people's money isn't his birthright. Whether he's sorry or just sorry he got caught, that's his journey, not mine. 6 months after the sentencing, I published my book, The Price of Community, an HOA Financial Abuse Survivor's Guide. The dedication read, "For my father, who taught me my worth, and for my vice president neighbor, who helped me remember it." The book tour was exhausting but fulfilling. At every stop, residents approached with their own stories, the executive whose president controlled every penny while she earned 6 figures, the teacher whose board treated her like a bank, the widow whose neighbors only called when they needed money. "How did you find the strength?" they asked again and again. "I didn't find it," I'd answer. "I built it one documented transaction at a time." The vice president came to several events, sitting in the back, sometimes crying as I spoke about our journey. She'd started her own support group for residents recovering from HOA manipulation. Rachel's Rebels, they called themselves, which made me laugh and cry in equal measure. A year to the day after I'd moved out, we held Thanksgiving at my apartment. The vice president, Sarah, Miss Hartley Victoria, She insisted I call her now, and 3 women from the vice president's support group. We gathered around the mahogany table, now scarred with new memories, wine rings from late-night strategy sessions, scratches from spreading out legal documents, the small burn mark from when I'd worked until 3 a.m. on my book and knocked over a candle. "Before we eat," I said, raising my glass, "I want to share something. A year ago I was told this table wasn't mine, that I hadn't earned my place at it, that my only value was in what I could provide to others. I looked around at these women who'd become my chosen community. They were wrong. This table isn't mine because I paid for it, though I did, many times over. It's mine because I decide who sits here, because I choose to surround myself with people who see my worth beyond my wallet." "To chosen community," Sarah proposed. "To survival," added one of the vice president's friends. "To fighting back," Victoria chimed in. "To second chances," the vice president said quietly, meeting my eyes. "To all of that," I agreed. "And to tables where everyone has an equal seat." We ate and laughed and shared stories of triumph and setback. No one sat at the head because we were all equals here. No one paid more than their share because fairness was the foundation of every gathering at my table. As the evening wound down and guests prepared to leave, the vice president lingered. "I need to tell you something," she said. "I'm selling the old clubhouse share." I wasn't surprised. Too many ghosts lived in those walls. I found a small condo near the library. 1 bedroom, just enough space for me. She hesitated. "I'm putting half the proceeds in a trust for residents leaving HOA financial abuse situations. I want to call it the Marcus Lennox Fund, if that's okay." "Dad would love that," I said, and meant it. She hugged me then, the first real embrace we'd shared in years. "I know I can never make up for what I let happen. But I want you to know you saved more than just yourself. You saved me too. From a life that was killing me slowly, one stolen dollar at a time." After everyone left, I sat alone at my father's table with a cup of tea and my laptop. The cursor blinked on a blank page. My next book, maybe, or just thoughts that needed space to breathe. I typed, "They said this table wasn't mine." Then I smiled and continued. "They were wrong. It was always mine. I just had to be willing to flip it, refinish it, and choose better guests. Because the thing about tables is this: they're meant to bring people together, not divide them by worth. They're meant to nourish, not diminish. They're meant to be places of equality, not hierarchy." I saved the document and closed my laptop. Outside, the city sparkled with a million lights. Each one a story, a struggle, a survival. Somewhere in federal prison, Karen and Derek were learning what it meant to truly have nothing. No power, no control, no access to other people's earnings. Perhaps they'd emerge reformed. Perhaps not. That wasn't my concern anymore. My concern was this table, this life, this freedom I'd purchased, not with money, but with courage. The price had been high: community relationships, sleepless nights, the comfortable lie that silence equals peace, but the return on investment priceless. I ran my hand over the mahogany surface, feeling every grain, every imperfection, every story held in the wood. My father's table, my father's legacy, the vice president's redemption, my declaration of independence. This table was mine. And finally, so was my life. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and exchange thoughts about this journey. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and hit that bell to help more people discover and hear this tale of survival and triumph. Your support means everything.